Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Wuhan in central China. Some analysts call it China's Nagpur. It is the Communist Party headquarters in China. There's a very important, the first of its kind summit meeting, informal summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This will start in about an hour from now. This is important. It's the first meet between the two heads of government and state after the Doklam standoff. The summit will kick off with a one-on-one. There will be a tour of the provincial museum there, which showcases the history of Wuhan. The two leaders will then have an informal meeting. Apparently, there will be 6 officials from both sides, which include National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale, and some other officials. They will have 5 rounds of talks over 2 days. The interaction is expected to stretch over 6 to 8 hours, both today and tomorrow. Now, this is extremely significant. Of course, there are sources in the government who say that micro issues like the 73-day-long Doklam standoff will not be on the agenda, but what is likely to be discussed, there is no formal agenda, is what is being officially said, but what will be discussed is a broader roadmap to take the boundary talks forward. Developments in India-China relations, the road ahead will also be discussed. The worldview, India's worldview, China's worldview, the relationship between each other, that's also going to be discussed. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping will at least have 5 rounds of extensive talks on Friday and Saturday. Let's quickly listen in to India's ambassador to China, Gautam Bambavle.
The entire visit is going to be informal. And when we say it is informal, the main elements of an informal summit, and in this particular informal summit between Prime Minister Mr. Modi and President Mr. Xi Jinping of China, the main elements will be that there is going to be no set agenda for their talks. They will probably have a walk in the park, or they might have a boat ride on the East Lake here in Wuhan. And while they're doing this, they will be discussing various issues between the two of them. A third element in an informal summit is that there is no outcome documents in terms of a memorandum of understanding or an agreement which is signed between the two countries.
The issues that today are outstanding between India and China can't be discussed all of a sudden. You have to prepare the ground for it, and there has to be a comprehensive conference for that purpose. At the moment, the whole objective is to reset the relationship and restart it and start having warm, friendly exchanges. And from that point of view, this is the best approach that the Prime Minister is taking.
They will be meeting in a very casual, informal environment. There won't be the agenda would be open. They would be spending a lot of time. It's spread over 2 days. So there will be a very different kind of conversation, because normally we meet in a sort of a delegation level across the table very formally. So this would be much more personal and much more interactive.
The relationship between India and China undoubtedly is complex. There are huge areas of commonality or shared interests, but on the other hand, there are differences on some very fundamental issues. I think the fact that the two leaders are now going to meet in a very special format indicates that a very special effort will be made at the highest political levels to forge a common approach.
Core issues concerning India, like the NSG, Masood Azhar, CPEC, OBOR, etc., are likely to be on the table. Similarly, core issues that continue to worry China, the Taiwan card, the Tibet card, the CPEC, OBR, etc., are likely to be taken up by China. I don't think there is going to be any compromise by either side on the core concerns of each other. However, it is the international arena that is of interest, particularly globalization, global trade, increasing trade tariffs being imposed by America, which will affect Indian economy as well as global terrorism. देखिए, अगर इसका कोई आउटकम निकल कर आए तब तो ये दौरा कामयाब माना जाएगा, लेकिन सिर्फ ये औपचारिकता अगर है, प्रधानमंत्री जी जैसे और देशों में जा रहे हैं लेकिन कोई निष्कर्ष नहीं निकल रहा है, उसका देश को क्या लाभ मिल रहा है, देश की विदेश नीति को क्या लाभ मिल रहा है, ये भी स्पष्ट होना चाहिए। भारत और चीन के बीच में जो बहुत सारे इश्यूज़ हैं उस पर बातचीत होगी और कोई उसका समाधान निकलेगा।
I have the most authoritative voices joining me on the broadcast. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, India's former ambassador to Italy. He's someone who watches developments in India, China very closely. Was also posted in Pakistan. Professor S.D. Muni, Professor Emeritus JNU, former ambassador. He joins us on the broadcast. Professor Swaran Singh, he's a China expert, a keen China watcher. Jawaharlal Nehru University, he joins us on the broadcast. I also have with me my colleague Geeta Mohan, Foreign Affairs Editor, India Today. But I first want to quickly cut across to India Today's Anant Krishnan, who's joining us live from Wuhan in China. Anant, so in about 50 minutes from now, this meeting starts. What's the pulse on ground? What's the Chinese media writing about the Prime Minister's visit?
Well, Gaurav, in about 50 minutes from now, their joint intimate tour of the Provincial Museum will begin here in Wuhan. And it's quite interesting that the choice of the exhibition is a newly unearthed tomb of a Chinese leader and warlord from the Warring States period. So perhaps a lesson in there for India and China and Modi and Xi as well in managing their relations. So it's going to be an intimate walk and talk at the museum, followed by more structured talks. There's a lot of expectations in the Chinese media this morning, speaking of a new start and hoping that the two sides will be able to correct many of the growing list of disputes, perhaps not solve them, but at least manage them. That's the expectations from the Chinese side, at least, here in Wuhan this morning.
Okay. Professor Muni, is that given the level of distrust between India and China? In India, expectations are deliberately being kept low. In China, the Chinese media seems to indicate that this is a new dawn, a new start, starting afresh. What are key takeaways in your appreciation?
Well, they are saying this is a meeting to exchange on visions, to find out how we interact with the world, how we interact with each other. I think there is no dearth of vision statement between India and China, to my mind. There have been repeated Manmohan Singh, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Rajiv Gandhi, when President Xi came here in September 2014. You have ample evidence that the two countries do not want a conflict, that the two countries want to share in shaping the world in one way or the other. And yet these problems are cropping up. Therefore, I think the unknown or uncovered agenda, and agenda is not being specified, because once you have agenda, you have to show outcomes on what happened, point A, B, C, D. Therefore, the general idea is to say why, despite all this basic understanding that India and China cannot afford to have a conflictual relationship with each other in Asia, why it is that the tensions crop up again and again. And I think if that effort can be addressed, that issue can be addressed properly, and they can find out why it is happening. The Indian perception, we can discuss it in details later. The Indian perception is that it is the PLA, it is other sectors of Chinese government which create a problem.
But now they're all under President Xi Jinping.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. But yes, I don't buy that thesis.
Yes.
Because the Chinese system doesn't work that way.
Oh, absolutely, and especially now, Professor Swaran Singh, especially now. Give me a moment. I quickly also want to cut across to my colleague Shudhi Ranjan Sen. Now, Shudhi, each time the Chinese and Indians meet, so while there is, there's a lot of warmth that's visible on camera, behind the scenes, there's always tension. For example, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi and he opened his home and heart to President Xi Jinping in Ahmedabad, there was an informal get-together, open collar, all of that was happening. The Chinese forces were coming into Chumar. Now, that is an indication that China will be sweet to you on your face, but stab you in the back elsewhere. Is that apprehension there even this time? What's the situation like along the LAC? I'll just establish that line with India Today's Shruti Ranjan Sen in a moment. But Professor Swaran Singh, is that a genuine apprehension? Each time, whether it was then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, when he went to China, met Li Keqiang, there was a Chinese incursion. When Xi Jinping came to India, there was an incursion.
And that's true. There have been incursions. In fact, there have been coincidents like this way back in 1979 when Foreign Minister Vajpayee had to cut short his visit. So there are several examples that can be picked up. It's not definitive whether it is calibrated on Chinese side, but yes, that needs to be taken a note of. But at this stage, it looks like there was a kind of a dead end on several issues where things were not moving at all. Whether it is India's membership to NSG, where we do need yes from China. Also, we need China's yes on Azhar Masood's name being put on the sanctions list. There have been repeated incursions that you mentioned. The last one was rather difficult, 73 days. There are versions of who blinked first, etc., etc. So there was a sense that the arrangements that we have so far, between two countries are not really delivering that effectively. Ultimately, we do have consultations and we resolve issues, but it's happening repeatedly and it's not being resolved very quickly.
Yes.
So we need to really redefine, and I think redefinition can happen at the top level. So, bold initiatives at very, very informal understanding level, not on the paper as of now, is possibly the aim on both sides, because both sides realize enormous limitations and compulsions that are guiding them to really sit together and say, how can we move forward? We have reached a dead end on several issues.
Oh, absolutely. And some commentators, Anand, before I let you go, since you have to go for your security clearances in Wuhan, some commentators are saying, both in China and even in the West, that this is because America is tightening its screws on China. China does not want to be isolated, and that is why this outreach to India. But there's also the fact, Anand, that both India and China stand to gain, especially on economy, should they be competitors but not rivals.
I think that's exactly correct, Gaurav, and it's very interesting that the focus in China has not at all been on the bilateral front, but a lot on the global front. We heard that from Wang Yi, the foreign minister. We heard that from other officials, that they've been speaking about protectionism, anti-globalization sentiment, Trump's policies. So they want to forge a common cause with India on this. They perhaps see this as one way to, at least while shelving differences on the bilateral front, perhaps inject some trust and at least find some common ground on issues where India and China actually do see eye to eye. But India, let me just quickly add, has serious concerns on the trade front. The deficit is growing, and Prime Minister Modi will be raising this with Xi Jinping in terms of better market access for Indian IT pharma companies. India is very displeased with what China has done. So that's something India will be pushing for quite strongly at the Wuhan summit.
Okay, Anand, keep tracking that story. You're going to be extremely busy over the next 2 days. We'll keep coming back to you for more. Now, the Chinese government mouthpiece, the Global Times, has hailed this informal interaction, informal summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. The Chinese National Daily said that Modi-Xi informal meet at Wuhan will promote mutual trust and reciprocity between the two countries. It went on to say that the meet will also be a cornerstone of a stable, long-term relationship between India and China. It urged both China and India to avoid confrontation, saying disputes must be controlled. The Daily went on to say that China should let India know that Beijing does not define New Delhi as an opponent nor seek to hinder India's development. It went on to say that the Chinese government should also convince India that the China-Pakistan economic corridor is an economic cooperation, is economic cooperation with Pakistan and does not influence Chinese neutrality. Let me quickly bring in Geeta Mohan for more on this. And Geeta, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Astana seemed to indicate, and that was on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, matbhed manbhed na ho jaye. That was his indication to the Chinese president. But now, how are they taking it forward? Because Doklam happened. India is very, very unhappy with China blocking, action against Maulana Masood Azhar and the nuclear suppliers group.
Well, Gaurav, the fact of the matter is that it has been a very difficult year for India and China, and they want to at least start addressing the outstanding issues between the two countries. The fact that officials could not do it at their level and it required intervention at the highest level goes to show the kind of difficulties both countries were facing. And while we talk about the Global Times article, the messaging is quite mixed. They are talking about the positives in the relationship, but also it is the entire article speaks of the threats and warnings latently that China has issued to India, saying that do not hobnob with the West, do not go ahead with the Indo-Pacific agreements and exercises that you are involved in, and anything that tantamounts to being anti-China. So there's a lot of messaging, and very clear messaging over here is also that they are not going to give up on their all-weather friend Pakistan. So when it comes to India-China, Gaurav, this time around, while it's an informal summit and they're looking at trying to take things forward, there is no low-hanging fruit.
Thanks for watching the video. For more such news and updates, please like, share and subscribe to India Today. Also check out our other great videos from our channel. We know you would love to.